For centuries, scalp hair was a really big genetic question mark. Why did humans have curly hair? This question was met by scientific racism and eugenics, and in turn would take nearly a century to answer. In 2023, researchers from Penn State released their findings. Welcome, my brilliant beauty babes, into the world of glamour. I'm your host, Tiggy, and today you're watching episode 1 of Beauty Files, a beauty lover's deep dive into what makes glam go round. Today's question is, well, what is the evolutionary reason behind straight hair? We're gonna be answering this question while I do my makeup because honestly, I was raised by Bailey Sarian and I do my makeup to morbid. Just a disclaimer, all references will be linked probably incorrectly in the show notes. I say incorrectly because I am not a professional. This is just my research into a topic that interests me. This is for entertainment purposes only. If you need research material, look in the show notes where I have my references listed, probably incorrectly. Also, a really important note before we get into this, race is a social construct. There are no distinct differences between races that would equate to any type of humanoid or subspecies human. And in addition to that, eugenics has been proven to be unscientific and was used to perpetuate racism within Western society for a century. If you take two cats and one's orange and one's a tuxedo, does that make the orange cat any less of a cat? Does that mean that it deserves to die? Scalp hair is a defining characteristic for humanity. The story begins in 2013, where researchers have discovered nearly 15 remains in a cave within the South African Naledi system, or chamber, introducing humanity to the discovery of Homo Naledi. Also in 2013, 12-year-old Vanessa Van Dyke has just been threatened by school administrators that if she does not cut her hair, she will be expelled. Humans evolved within equatorial Africa, and you may be asking yourself, okay, well, where is equatorial Africa? Equatorial Africa is defined as the countries that lie along the equator within Africa. I know it sounds super simple, but for me, I had to take a second and actually look into it. Other places that are equatorial are places like Brazil and then Maldives. Countries that lie along the equator are known for having really good weather all year round. Equatorial Africa is considered the birthplace of humanity. I'm still learning about evolution, but from what I understand, humans did not evolve from primates. We share a common ancestor with primates that existed like 6 to 8 million years ago. How this doesn't make us a primate? I don't know. Today, our closest living relative are chimpanzees and bonobos. I think we share like 98 to like 99% of our DNA with chimpanzees, which is insane because they're literally our genetic cousins. From this great ancestor, we got Homo habilis, which is considered early man. After Homo habilis came Homo erectus, which is one step below Homo sapiens. They're credited with things like burying their dead, starting fires, migrating. And then after Homo erectus came Homo sapiens. As we were evolving, other ancestors from that distant relative were also evolving. There were other humanoid species that walk the earth. The discovery of Homo Naledi really challenged what scientists understood about human evolution up to that point. Homo Naledi bridged the gap physically between Homo habilis and Homo erectus. Early man still retained a lot of its more primitive attributes. For lack of better words, think humanish monkeys, whereas Homo erectus looked very, very similar to what humans look like right now. And Homo Naledi was the physical bridge in between them. Really, it left a big question mark for scientists because Homo sapiens existed alongside Homo Naledi 300,000 to 200,000 years ago. So where it stands in the timeline itself is very heavily debated. A really big distinction between Homo Naledi and Homo sapiens is brain size. They have approximately 1/3 of our brain size and were presumably bald, just like how Homo erectus was. Again, they did retain most of their primitive form aside from their hands, feet, and their brain anatomy, which is interesting because they had 1/3 of our brain size. They have been associated with possibly burying their dead and possibly being able to use fire. Both behaviors had previously been attributed to Homo erectus. Essentially, this kind of left scientists confused because it challenged where within the evolutionary chain we developed some type of complex cognitive ability. The question that now is raised is what caused our brains to grow then? If our link between Homo habilis, which is early man, and Homo erectus already possessed some form of cognitive complexity, what caused our brain to grow? Hey, editing Tiggy here. I was actually wrong about my understanding of Homo naledi's physiology and where that fit within the evolutionary chain. Homo naledi had a smaller brain size than Homo habilis, but still had some humanoid characteristics such as hands, feet, and their brain anatomy. Scientists were more so confused about where they fit in within the evolutionary chain because we were coexisting with them like 200 to 300,000 years ago. Both Homo habilis and Homo naledi are basically like a conglomeration of an ape and a human. It is believed that Homo naledi is actually what came right before Homo habilis. The question here still stands, like we did exhibit some like complex cognitive ability, even more so in some respect than Homo habilis did at that time in our evolutionary stage. Also, it's weird because why did this Homo species exist nearly 200,000 years ago instead of the millions of years ago where it's actually supposed to be within the evolutionary chain? I was like watching it back and I was like, something ain't right. The question, however, still stands. What caused our brains to grow? And to answer that, we have to look at Homo erectus. Homo erectus is essentially our parents. I know my face might look a little off right now, but if you look at my hand where I've blended it out, it looks kind of perfect. They were the first of the homos to move and leave Africa. This is where we see humans losing most of their primitive attributes. They were, again, a similar size and shape as humans, but early on in their evolution, they lacked in one thing: brain size. What's really interesting about Homo erectus is that within 2 million years, their brains actually changed. It went from as small as Homo Naledis to almost as big as Homo Sapiens. Okay, but why? Again, we're in equatorial Africa where Homo erectus is walking around on 2 legs. He's walking around and he's like, damn, it is hot as hell. So he loses all of his fur. So now Homo erectus is again walking around in equatorial Africa and he's like, damn, why am I still so hot? I must need an air conditioner. So boom, Homo erectus develops sweat glands. So Homo erectus loses his fur. He's like, okay, I'm hot. I gotta get rid of this blanket that's on me. Then he develops sweat glands. So he's like, oh my gosh, I have an internal air conditioning now. Why am I still so hot? Homo erectus is walking around on 2 feet, which places his brain directly pointed at the sun, which means that his scalp and subsequently his brain are receiving a whole freaking lot of solar radiation. So to combat this, Homo erectus grows scalp hair. Now, I don't know if you guys knew this, but the brain itself generates a lot of freaking heat. It just basically takes a lot of energy to run, especially the larger it grows. And it's also sensitive to heat, which is why we get things like heat stroke. If this was the look, I would be low-key happy. Researchers, scientists, and anthropologists believe that hair might have been the mechanism that cooled the brain down enough to allow it to grow. Essentially, the growth of hair is what allowed our brains to stop overheating and finally get a chance to actually grow and breathe. My immediate next question was, so what type of hair did we grow then? 10 years after the discovery of Homo Naledi, which, by the way, that was 2023, and can you believe it's literally 2026? Researchers from Penn State have released their findings because they also had a question. How did diverse hair textures affect heat gain from solar radiation to the scalp? The scientists used a thermal mannequin and 3 human hair wigs. Did you guys know that mannequin and mannequin are 2 different things? Mannequin is used for like medical findings and scientific research and that kind of stuff, whereas mannequin, like what we all associate with like a mannequin, is typically used by artists, doll makers, dressmakers, and that's what we see that has like clothes hanging on it in the mall. This model utilized electricity to simulate body heat and allowed scientists to observe the transfer of heat between human skin and the environment. They programmed it to maintain a surface temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very similar to humans' natural like body temperature, and they placed it within a wind-controlled tunnel. I blended my nose contour with my concealer brush, and I can't tell if it looks good or not. See, I could be a scientist because then I'd be really concerned about what if that thing like reanimates in the middle of us doing this test on it. They took base measurements by how much power was required to keep that mannequin at a constant temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and then they shined lights on its scalp to simulate solar radiation. The experiment was done using 4 states and 3 wigs. None, straight, kind of curly, hella curly. They also used varying wind speeds, and they put water on the scalp to simulate sweating. They took those results and analyzed it based upon 86 degrees Fahrenheit and 60% humidity, which is common in places like equatorial Africa and other places along the equator, that good weather all year long. The results were limited because they were limited in wig variations and also the hair color on the wigs. Now, they do speculate that the hair color actually does not matter, and so the results still stand. The results were that all hair prevented solar radiation to the scalp, but tightly coiled hair did the best. If you guys ever read historical fiction, then you're probably familiar with people describing horsey hair, coily hair, kinky hair as being woolly. But essentially, these results proved that coily hair is not woolly because it does not insulate or trap heat. Coily hair protects your head from the heat and allows you to still maintain sufficient heat loss. Because of this, it is assumed that coily hair was the ancestral hair of Homo erectus and early Homo sapiens. So now we've answered the questions, why did we grow hair? And then what type of hair did we grow? My question still stands. How did we get from curly, coily hair to straight hair? Frankly, it took a little bit of social engineering, and it could have been an evolutionary co-option. Co-option basically means that you started out having a specific characteristic, and then it evolved into serving another function, such as like birds having feathers to insulate themselves versus birds having feathers to fly. For us, it went from thermal heat regulation into secondary social cues. The importance of hair, hairstyling, and the prevalence of long hair evolved with social communication and Homo sapiens dispersal amongst different continents. Styling your hair basically signifies your age, how creative you can be, your manual skills, your health status, your social status, sexual maturity. And on that last one, it actually makes sense because there has been like a debate across social media whether young girls should wear weave or not, whether that be from like braiding hair or bundles. Also, another fun fact, Egyptians wore hair extensions to signal social status. Hairstyles, long hair signals, hey, I'm healthy, I'm strong, I'm creative, look at my delicate manual labor, this is how old I am, this is where I stand in society, versus like having compromised or weak hair signals like, oh, I'm weak and I'm diseased. Hair also continued to change and evolve based on geographical location. As we moved up north, we ran into Neanderthals and Denisovians, and as we mixed with them, straight hair became a lot more common, as monogamy became like its only sustainable option for a society that's like labor was divided by sex. Rare traits could have been selected as a means of guaranteeing a mate. This was to ensure healthy and genetically diverse offspring. It offered greater disease resistance, and there was also like a general novelty associated with it. This differs from eugenics because it is true a diverse genome, because I can't say genealogically, does offer better disease resistance. While eugenicists did believe in evolution in this way, they also believed in manipulating evolution in order to preserve and quote unquote purify the human race. I'm gonna read the exact definition so I don't fuck this up. Eugenics is the study of how to arrange reproduction within the human population to increase the occurrence of traits deemed desirable. In 1883, Francis Galton came to the conclusion that all human traits were indeed inherited and thus coined the term eugenics. This completely disregards nature versus nurture. When I say all characteristics, I mean everything from genetic disorders, mental health disorders, social status, economic status, race, which is wrong because it completely disregarded nature versus nurture in people like criminals. It eventually evolved into the widespread belief that there was an inferior race and a superior race. This rhetoric was perpetuated by Western society, resulting in systemic and medical racism. We saw involuntary sterilization, segregation, and social inclusion. Famously, the Nazis actually used eugenics in order to justify their mass genocide and mistreatment of Jewish people, disabled people, LGBTQ people, and other minorities. Eugene Fischer was a German professor of anthropology, medicine, and eugenics, and he was also a member of the Nazi Party. He was known to use hair type as a way to distinguish and classify people as opposed to complexion. In the 1920s, eugenics rhetoric was very prevalent in America, and outward characteristics perpetuated racism. Kinky hair, thick lips, dark skin, wide noses. Those were all attributes that eugenicists described as unattractive and unappealing. So of course, corporations sought to capitalize on this. We started seeing a large prevalence of things like skin bleaching cream and chemical ways to straighten your hair. Editing Tiggy here again, I actually really wanted to drive the point home that eugenics was used to kind of like segregate, discriminate, and essentially kill and maim a lot of people. And that really affects how the beauty market looked for people of color at that time, because the closer to white you were appearing, the more you fit into the blessed or superior race or better society, etc., etc. And it wasn't just women. Men had jerry curls and relaxers too. I mean, in Malcolm X's book, he literally talks about going and getting a perm. You see what I'm saying here? Like, it wasn't just like, oh, women have this unattainable beauty standard. It was prevalent amongst a lot of minority communities to conform and appear as white passing as possible. One of the reasons why Malcolm X was getting a curly perm or a perm in general was because he was nearly a white passing black man. He was as light as they came with red hair. The prevalence of skin bleaching and hair straightening products are things that are just now becoming taboo within the Black American and African American communities. Of course, colorism in and of itself, but there was also a huge push for you to date and marry and reproduce with people who had Eurocentric features. Another social media discourse that I see a lot is Black men dating white women. I feel like outside of, yes, natural preference, etc., that is also a part of the eugenics push that has been perpetuated in Western society over the past century. That's why you see like Black men or Black people sometimes accepting the bottom of the barrel, like quote unquote unattractive people as their mates, because anything is better than Blackness. Anything is better than being unattractive and undesirable. And this is all rhetoric that was steeped in racism and also eugenics theory at the same time happening in America. That's how it ties into the overall theme today. What is the evolutionary reason behind straight hair? It's because we literally started breeding it out of us. And so that's kind of like the connecting link that I don't really think that I drove home in the video. To this day, people who wear their natural hair are discriminated against in corporate and academic settings. We get events like Vanessa Van Dyke, who is literally just 12 years old when she decided to go to her school administrators and say, hey, these kids are bullying me because of my hair. And look, they all have straight hair. And instead of listening to that girl and talking to those children, they instead threatened to expel her because she did not comply with the school quote unquote dress code. I'm going to read the quote exactly because Vanessa Van Dyke was quoted saying, "My hair says that I'm unique. First of all, it's puffy and I like it that way. I know people will tease me about it because it's not straight and I don't fit in." The school handbook at that time read, "Hair must be a natural color and must not be a distraction," and goes on to state and list examples that included mohawks, shaved designs, and rat tails. School administrators went on to make a statement saying that we're not asking her to put products in her hair or cut her hair, we're asking her to style her hair within the guidelines according to the school handbook. The original article is now unavailable on Local 6 News Orlando, but I did thoroughly read the follow-up article which tried to reframe this whole thing by saying local teen no longer has to cut her hair. But in that follow-up report, I did read very clearly that they were either going to pull her from school altogether or bow to the administrators. To offer a little bit of clarity here, what I'm saying is that the school handbook does not specify that the hair that is growing out of a student's head is a quote unquote distraction or not. That is up largely to the interpretation of the administrators. And in this case, the administrators, instead of siding with this little girl who's wearing her hair in her natural state, they decided to use the vague language within the school handbook to perpetuate eugenics and racism, effectively continuing to disrupt this girl's school experience. We also see things like texture wars on social media. Maybe that's a whole other topic that I'll get into. And we also see apps like TikTok not including coily hair in its app search and engine function. I also read into a biased research article done by L'Oreal's research and innovation team based in Paris. The team did a study on hair growth diameter, color, and shape based upon young adults within 24 different ethnic groupings and 5 different continents. Volunteer hair shapes were graded on a scale of 1 to 8, and the study had like 2,000 participants. For those hair category types, 1 to 2 was straight, 3 was wavy, 4 to 5 was frizzy, and then 6 to 8 was tightly curled. First of all, what does frizzy hair mean? What is frizzy hair and why do they take up 2 sections? What is frizzy hair? As a hair shape, what is frizzy hair? If you got an answer, meet me in the chat. They found that those that fell within that 6 to 8 category differed from the other groups in that they had a lower density and lower hair growth rate. Okay, so if you got curly hair, you have a lower hair density and lower hair growth rate. All right, I can accept that. But let's look at the numbers. Only 980 participants out of 2,000 participated in the study specifically for hair shape, which is what we're talking about right now. Out of that 980, only 57 fell within the 6 to 8 tightly curled hair category. 57 out of nearly 1,000. Categories 2 through 4 held the most amount of participants, coming in at 791. Again, categories 2 to 4, straight hair, wavy hair, and slightly frizzy hair. So again, they claim that one group is characterized by having weak hair density and a low growth rate and is quote unquote rather specific to the African hair type. And they also state that in those having mixed origin, it's common within them to carry over those weak hair and low density characteristics from their African ancestry. Africa has a population not including the diaspora. Africa has a population of 1.5 billion people. The world's population is 8.3 billion. That's nearly 20% of the world's population. And in this study, we were not fairly represented or assessed. This was from L'Oreal's Research and Innovation Center. They're going to use this data that they collected incorrectly and use that to inform. I was having difficulty spitting it out. They're using that for marketing and product development. So we have reached the end of the video. Actually, fun fact, curly hair does not exist in non-human primates. Their fur is primarily straight, but again, it's not hair, it's fur. Anyway, in conclusion, humans evolved to have coily hair because it protects our scalp and subsequently our brain from solar radiation, thus allowing it to grow. This has been concretely linked to brain development. And as our brains kind of reach this final form, our hair became a tool in social communication. And that is the evolutionary reason behind straight hair. I really didn't want to get into the weeds into like the medical or systemic racism or eugenics as a whole. If you have an interest in that, then I encourage you to go do some active learning surrounding it. Active learning is when you actually like create something out of what you're learning or write notes or, something that engages your brain at the same time that you're ingesting information to help you actually like retain the information. Oh, this is the makeup look too. period. I think it looks pretty freaking good, but what do I know? I really enjoyed talking to you guys today. I filmed this video twice now. The first time I was very nervous and I did not really like relay the information in the way that I wanted to. This morning when I was on my morning walk, I was like, there's more research to be done. There's more restructuring to be done. So I hope that this was super informative and entertaining at the same time for you guys. Again, if you need any like study resources, check the show notes where I have incorrectly probably listed all of my sources. All right, my brilliant beauty babes, if you have any questions, if you want to suggest any topics for the show, or if you just want to further discuss, you can meet me down in the chat. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys. And with that, mwah, stay lethal, babes.